Hello, welcome back to another quick video. It's been a while since I've done any sort of Oni videos, but we have a very simple and nice one today. So I'm back in the world of plain oxygen not included, and we're going through the usual process of trying to get our base up and running, and one of the things that we need is lime, and also fishies. So this today is going to be a super simple PACU build. Now, we do have a build from back in the day that we used to use, back before we had droppers and drop-off chutes and things like that we could use to basically drop eggs and keep them in a storage area so that we could replenish our stocks. Well, we don't need to do a lot of this anymore. The automation's gotten a lot simpler, and the build has gotten a lot simpler as well. So, what we basically have here is a tank that we're going to use for breeding our PACUs, and a tank that we're going to use for dropping off any excess eggs. Okay. Now, the problem with this was that you had to make sure that you kept a couple of your PACUs happy to keep them fed and keep them producing eggs, but you want to maintain your supply of these breeding fish. So the breeding fish are going to live in this tank, and everything else will just get dumped outside and let them hatch and go through their life cycle over here. So to do this, we've got some really simple automation in the background, and I know a lot of you always groan when I say really simple, but this is really, really simple. So we've got essentially two critter sensors that are managing the whole build, and a lot of you may have tinkered with this stuff already. I'm basically trying to get back into Oni at the moment, so if you've seen something like this before, I apologise. However, this was my sort of easy take on it. But basically what we've got is two critter sensors, one that is set to sense two critters that goes to a NOT gate, and this is our reset switch, okay? And then another critter sensor set to one critter, and that's going to be our solid signal, if you like. And all this basically is doing is sort of keeping an eye on how many critters we've got in the room. Now, whether that be a PACU or an egg, it doesn't matter. It counts critters all the same. And then what we have behind here is some conveyor lines. And basically, I was tinkering with this the other day on stream, and I was making a fundamental mistake in where my conveyor shutoff was located. So everything in this build is within this room. What we basically have here is an auto sweeper down at the bottom, and the auto sweeper's range is kind of important. The auto sweeper cannot reach this tile where the eggs are dropped off. So what it's going to be doing is trying to collect all of the eggs that are dropped by our PACUs that are inside. We've got two loaders here. One is for collecting any eggs that we don't want to be farming, so for example gulp fry eggs or tropical fry eggs, and they'll get dumped into here along with some eggshell that may fall in the room as well, you know, from falling down here. We've also got another conveyor loader here, and this one is set just to accept fry eggs, and this one has some conveyor lines behind it that run it to our shutoff. This other loader just basically goes out of the build and goes to a little drop-off point over there, to a little conveyor chute, and that's where everything's dropped, to say. But this one here, it's a little bit difficult to see. This loader basically goes up and into this conveyor shutoff, and then bypasses it as well. It runs straight through. The reason for that is, when we want critters to be in the build, we want the shutoff to be off and allow the eggs to pass by, which I'll show you in a minute. We'll set this running in a second. We want the eggs to be able to pass by the shutoff and drop into our room to keep our stocks going. But if not, we want them to hit this shutoff here and basically go to this little bridge and bridge into this line and dump into there. Okay, now at the top we've basically got a couple of feeders, and these are set to 1 kilo, so we can now actually restrict how much algae that we put in these feeders. And I've basically just put a chute here as if you were dropping your algae into the room. We also have a conveyor loader, an auto sweeper that's going to deliver the algae to the fish feeders. And this is just on its own little tiny bit of automation, which is basically a clock sensor telling it to only come on for 1% of the cycle. And you can have this wherever you want. Doesn't really matter where this slider is, as long as it's only on for like 1%. Also, the positioning of the sweeper is kind of important. Make sure it's above a solid tile. Reason being, if the clock sensor toggles off whilst the sweeper's in the middle of a job, it'll drop your algae straight down here, and you're giving your fishies free food, which we don't want. This auto sweeper is also in range of this tile here, so this can actually pick up any lime or eggshell, sorry. This one probably doesn't need to have eggshell on here. You could toggle that off. Isn't needed at all. And that can then be loaded into here, along with any fishy foods. So we'd have PACU fillets. This loader is just signifying where you would send your food and your eggshell out of the build. And again, that's all dealt with by this sweeper. This one sweeper can reach this tile and this tile, so it's going to collect everything. So if we let everything run, what I can basically do, I can trick this a little bit by forcing in some eggs. So if I throw that egg out there, you'll see that our automation has changed. Okay, so we are now ready to accept an egg. Our signal is set to red, which means that our shutoff is going to drop the egg through here. If it was green, it would send it down this line and out of the build. So if I now throw an egg in here, just as if this fish has laid an egg, it's going to pick up that egg, it's going to go into the loader, and it's going to hit this shutoff, at which point it's going to go up here. And that's now dumped into the build. Okay. Now, because we've got 2 critters in there, any other eggs that this boy would be laying in the meantime, which is probably going to be a few, again, we'll hit that shut off and we'll go and be dumped out the build. And that way you end up with lots of eggs up here. So we could dump a whole load of these in here and they'd all find their way back home. Like so. So it's a really easy little solution. The eggs that actually sit up on here will obviously hatch naturally. So if I put this fella back down here, he's going to incubate in, he's going to hatch out in less than a cycle. But basically then they will flop around until they find their way into the water and then they'll drop in. And it's basically maintaining 2 critters. We're only feeding these 1 kilo of algae each per cycle. So it takes about 2 kilos of algae. I'm sure there's probably some easier ways of feeding them less, but I just thought we'd feed them 1 kilo each. It seems very little nowadays to keep your fishies fed. Now the beauty of this as well, they only need to be fed once per cycle. So currently he's starving because I've literally just set this little recording build up, but he's starving at the minute. When he actually comes to eat, he will basically get the 8 from a feeder buff, and that will last for a whole cycle. So although he's starving, this will be reset once he eats from this feeder. So in a moment I can actually toggle this on a bit quicker. Our sweeper arm will come on, it'll fill up both of these feeding areas. Boop and boop. And then he'll come and eat, and if we look at his status, he'll go from not starving anymore, he's still ate from a feeder, and the starving cycle has been reset. So he'll still go through his process of laying eggs, his reproduction is still through the roof. And then, as I say, once this one hatches, he'll flip around and drop into the water, and then that'll maintain our supplies. As I say, if you wanted to, if you weren't using that many conveyors yet, if you wanted to dump your algae in here manually, you could do. I'd probably suggest something like ripping out a bit of floor here, putting in a pneumatic door. We'll just get rid of all this gubbins. And then you could maybe just have something like a, I don't know, maybe a dispenser dropping in here or something. You'd have to seal up this wall, but just to drop your algae in. This obviously ideally is hands off, so your tubes don't have to do anything in here. And very much it'd just be collecting you some spare fish and some eggshell. So this boy should hatch any second now. And we'll watch him go on his majestic journey. And then basically, yeah, that's it. I'll put the I'll put a build together for you to download so you can have a play with it yourself. We're in Alt-Z here, so he might struggle to find his way home. But yeah, basically he'll flip-flop around until he falls into the water, and then we've got our critters sorted. So as I say, I'll make a little save for you so you've got this so you can have a play with it yourselves. But yeah, it's just a nice little small build. As I say, you could have all your food going off to your kitchens, you could have your eggshell being sent somewhere else if you want to put another loader in here. And yeah, just a really nice little compact way of making yourself many eggs. So yeah, I hope that helps, guys. Much love as ever. If you'd like to come and watch me live, I'm generally on Twitch 4 days a week. My schedule will be below. And if you have any questions, just post them in the comments and I'll get back to you. Much love as ever. Take it easy. Bye-bye.